putting the question out, do you long for a life that you love? And of course, we're here in the Success Mindset group with bringing that right mindset to your life. And loving life is something that everyone deserves. And today we have a very special guest who is living that. And we're here to talk on that topic today. So like I said, we're going to be going a little longer than normal, but I do encourage you, please stay on to the very end. You do not want to miss the end. So please stay on to the very end. And I'd like now to introduce my guest, a very special woman. We had the opportunity to meet a couple of months ago through a Seven Sisters alumni conference. And I'm thrilled to welcome Lane Rosenthal. And Lane is the founder and leader of a boutique travel business called Paris Off Script, where she guides women on all exclusive trips to Paris. And Lane, I'd like to start with asking you, since you might be a new face to many of the members in the group, is to please tell us a little more about your background and what you're doing now.
Well, hello, Stephanie. Thank you for having me. I'm just delighted to be here, and I can't see who else is in the audience, but hello to everybody as well who is participating in the live stream. Thank you. You know, that is a big question. It's a long question. I'll start with what I do and then work backwards. I founded a business several years ago that gives me the opportunity to lead groups of 5 people for 5 days on all-inclusive trips through Paris. And this is not the Paris that you might think of when you think of Paris in your mind. It's what I call the Paris that we all want to know. It's really off the beaten path, but I walk the talk. It's a Paris that is unusual, that most people don't know about. And that's what I do for 5 days. It's a dream, and it is loving life. But how I got here was not linear in any way at all. In fact, if I look back on everything I've done, I would never have imagined that I'm where I am right now. I am a graduate of Mount Holyoke. I was an English major, and my first foray into the professional adult world was as an academic. I was enrolled in a doctoral program at a Big Ten school after Mount Holyoke. And from there, I made the decision to leave the doctoral program before I had done everything right up to my exams. There were no jobs. And so I then, and we'll fill in the blanks on some of this stuff later, but then I went and had a 20-year career in the brokerage business, selling everything from stocks to bonds to eventually trading bonds. My background, the things that have happened to me have happened because of life events, for most of us. So the next life event took me out of the brokerage business, and I moved to, my career in the brokerage business was in Chicago, moved to the Twin Cities and had a second child. And at that point, left the brokerage business and did what I like to say is I gave my children, my family, the gift of being a stay-at-home mom. I did that for a while until everybody was pretty much launched. But along the way, I was really hungry for something for myself. So during those years that I was home, I veered into a creative direction. I began writing, I began teaching writing, I freelanced a little bit, and for quite a while, I was working with high school students on their college application essays. And then another life change happened, and I wound up in Paris again, figuring out where I was going to find my meaning. And the idea for Paris Off Script, which I had several years earlier, it seemed like it was its time. And I didn't know it at the time, but I came here, and I thought, I have to find a way to keep this place in my life. So very circuitous route, nothing linear about it, nothing necessarily follows one after the other, but here I am.
I love that. So I was just jotting that down. So from academia to 20 years in the brokerage business, to being a mom, freelancing, life event gets you to Paris, and you make a decision that you got to keep Paris in your life. So tell us, what inspires you most about what you're doing now?
Well, Paris. And that's been a process. It's easy to say that. So what do I mean by that? Of course, it's inspiring. I mean, Paris is the place where I have cultivated and really seen my own creativity flourish. Mm-hmm. But I first, when I mentioned that I came to Paris to figure out my meaning, and after a life event, and the life event, by the way, was my mother's death. Mm-hmm. At that point, my children were launched, and I had spent 4 years down the rabbit hole seeing my parents on their final journey. And it was after my mother's death that I came back to Paris. But at that point, I'd been here many times. And although I didn't get here until well into my midlife. And once I did, it sounds cliched to say it, but it really did. It happened. It was love at first sight. I'm a city person. I'm originally from New York. I spent time in 14, 15 years in Chicago. And Paris spoke to me in the same way that New York always did. And then several years after that, my daughter studied, lived here for 3 years and studied. And that's really where I first got the opportunity to spend time here. And mm-hmm. and to see it in a way most foreigners don't get a chance to. And that's what started the inspiration. That's where the idea of how I was experiencing this city came to me when I was here. And I just thought, this place, most people don't know this place this way.
Yes.
And so Paris itself is my inspiration.
Wonderful.
It's
wonderful.
A well, it's a bottomless well.
Yes. So you had the inspiration, but what I think is so wonderful is that you had the courage to follow your heart. You had the courage to do something with the inspiration. And how did you do that?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I thought about it a lot. And it's a funny thing. First of all, you have to know your heart, okay? And when I was younger, I didn't know my heart. Mm-hmm. If I had, my background would be very different. I'm going to venture to say. And, we sort of absorb these things of we ought to, we should. And deep down, our heart gets very lost in all that. And, we've got responsibilities and mortgages, and things mount and mount and mount. And pretty soon, you can't find yourself at all in all that. So when I started following this thread that turned out to be my heart, I didn't know it. I didn't really know that's what I was doing. And I think that's a good thing, because I think if we do, we're likely to say, it, you know, all those self-editing things that we do for ourselves all the time might have entered into the equation. The other thing is, I'm very much an outlier and a maverick.
Mm-hmm.
I've discovered that about myself in my life. And so I don't know if I would use the word courage. There's something that it's more like drive. It's more like drive. And, you know, back to the inspiration question as well, part of what inspires me is I'm very competitive
Mm-hmm.
and I rise to a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
If you give me a challenge, watch out, you know, because if you tell me I can't do anything, watch out, because I take that as a gauntlet thrown down. That's just me. And so I think wrapped up in the courage to follow my heart is the surprise with what happened. I never expected Paris Off Script to be what it is today when I first started out. And, you know, interestingly, at the same time, I became certified to teach restorative yoga. And I thought that was what I was going to be doing, while, you know, this other Paris idea thing was going to be on the back burner. And it didn't turn out to be that way at all. It was like truly like a child that wanted to be born.
Mm-hmm. How wonderful. I love that. And yeah, so I mean, if you know, I hear what you're saying. I do want to nonetheless applaud you for maverick or not, competitive or not, for really taking that leap. And also, even when you knew that it was going to be this and not the yoga, right? Also having the courage to follow that. And, you know, because this group is so much about personal growth, and as you and I both know, life is really about growing, right? Like you were mentioning, you didn't know when you were younger what was really in your heart, right? And I think that's a journey for so many of us. Life is this unfolding process. So tell us, how have you grown?
Oh, that's, you know, that's an interesting question. And when I look back at my younger self, I don't know if it was Mount Holyoke where the seeds were planted, but I love to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And learning, you can't, growth goes hand in hand with learning. And certainly the biggest growth that I've experienced with this is living independently in a foreign country. I mean, how can you not grow from that? Growth comes from letting yourself be outside your comfort zone. And when I came back to Paris after my mother had died, even though I'd been here many, many times before then, it took me a long time to get here. And then once I got here, I very quickly caught up. And I had a lot of years, I can't remember how many times in 20 years I've been here, but it's only been 20 years since I first came here. So when I came back then, though, I couldn't remember a time in my life that I was going somewhere completely alone. And by that, I mean, not on a plane, not, just literally where there was nobody at the other end who was going to know me, meet me. There was no meeting, there was no conference, there was nothing. It was me and Paris. And I was on the edge. I was, what am I doing? The language, blah, blah, blah. And, talk about following your heart. I think my soul lives here because I felt immediately at home. And that's been extraordinary. And so I know I'm a different person from the person. I know I've grown. I'm the same person, but I know I have, like a flower that's opened. I'm just, there's more nuance since this whole experience, because it's different, because it's outside of my own country.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, by the way, I think it was G.K. Chesterton, and I'll quote him again later, but who said there's nothing that gives you perspective on your own culture than stepping away from it and looking at it from afar. And that has given me growth too. So it's the whole tolerance, certainly the language competency, which has enabled me to enter a different culture. And that has brought growth and understanding, and joy. It's just, it all feeds on itself. I don't want to stop learning. There's always more. There's always, it's indescribable.
Yes.
For lack of a better word.
Yes, that is wonderful. And I'm so glad you brought up that, the getting out of your comfort zone. In the work that I do, we call it trampling the terror barrier. It sounds like you burst right through that. That is so important for growth, right?
It is. It is. And if you dissect it and deconstruct it, you'll never do it. It's okay to recognize it and say, okay, I'm doing this and I'm really on the edge of my comfort zone. How am I going to do this? But if you go through that, you come out on the other side knowing your strengths and so much stronger, and I don't mean to talk about death a lot, but I've had some turning points in my life of people who have been very close to me. And the first time I sat at somebody's bedside and watched them die, I came away from that experience completely changed. You can't not. And when I advocated for my mother in her later years, it showed me my own strength of what I'm capable of handling and getting through. And so all that goes into the great tapestry that becomes your life to do other things as well.
Yes. True.
But if you're always in your comfort zone, well, I won't say anything political, but how do you grow and learn? How do you come to any other understanding? This, I think, was the whole. I can't tell you very much of what I learned in my classes at Mount Holyoke. Who knows? I don't remember. But I do think it was the broadening of my mind and my thinking.
Yes.
That set me on that path.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, because this is a mindset group, could you talk a little bit then, what role has mindset played for you?
Oh, it's all mindset. It's huge.
Yes.
I'll give you a couple of examples. One general. First of all, I'm an extrovert, but I also spend an awful lot of time inside my own head. I'm a writer too. And a writer, you observe. And if I'm in a funk and I've spent too much time in my own head, honestly, I go outside here and I feel the energy seeping through the sidewalks. And an extrovert does draw energy from the outside world rather than an interior world.
Yes.
And my mood changes. So that's in general. But I had the occasion to really experience this quite acutely last fall. I was here and I'd been burned a little bit. I'd had some cancellations and things like that. It's just been an unprecedented time, as we all know. But and I had a trip here that was very emotionally up and down. And I was a doggone mess. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's not how I feel. And so I have followed to a great extent my intuition. And, I don't have a crystal ball, but my intuition is kind of saying, you know what? We are still in a world where COVID is still very much present in the travel industry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Once I began to see things more clearly and made the decision to change my outlook, which was as recently as December, honestly, the reason we're here having this conversation today is because I had a change in my mindset. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wait a minute, no, let's look at it from this angle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, had I not come to that, gotten rid of that narrow-minded thinking, Emerson said a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be here today. So mindset is everything.
It is everything.
It's everything.
Yeah. And I love also how you mentioned, especially well-educated people and then business people can be overly analytical, overly logical, that brain is, really in that particular ROI type of format. I love how you mentioned imagination, right? Imagination is what allows people to live their dream. You've got to go to imagination, right?
Children are full of imagination.
Yes.
As we mature, we lose that capacity. Mm-hmm. We lose that ability to be imaginative, to be all, to allow ourselves wonder, to allow our minds to wander and see where it goes and what happens. Yes. And we all need a bit of that. Otherwise, okay, I'm going to say something else because I'm obsessed with this a little bit. Otherwise, we have AI. Okay, I said it.
Right. You're
Truly, then we become our own machines.
Yes, so true. When there's so much magnificence and beauty in the world.
Yeah. Exactly.
Elaine, we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Mm-hmm.
I would. What I'm all about is about seeing. Mm. And we've talked about a mindset. We've talked about being open. 3 people, interestingly, two French and 1 British, all living around the turn of the last century, Proust, Albert Kahn, and G.K. Chesterton, all said in a different way the same thing. It's about having eyes to see. Mm. Proust said the only true voyage of discovery would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess new eyes. Mm. Albert Kahn, who was an early 20th century banker and philanthropist who was fascinated by the world, the biggest project of his life was called Archives de la Planète, Archives of the Planet. And between 1909 and 1931, he sent out a dozen camera and film operators with equipment that he had outfitted them with to collect photographic and cinematography from more than 50 countries. He gave them one directive. And he said, I only ask one thing of you. Keep your eyes wide open. Mm-hmm. And G.K. Chesterton, to bring it a little bit more closer to home, talked about the traveler. And he said, the traveler sees what he sees. The traveler sees what she sees. The tourist sees what she has come to see. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I had the very profound pleasure of doing an interview a couple of years ago with somebody who wrote an article. And she said to me in an email afterwards, she said, every time I think of you, I'm reminded that the world is full of possibilities if we have eyes to see them.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah.
So
Thank you
that's
for
my
sharing that.
thought.
Yeah, and thank you for those quotes too. And Lane, if members of our audience want to contact you, where can they find you?
The easiest way is on my email, which is lane@parisoffscript.com. Then I have a website, which is parisoffscript.com. And that links to all my social media and YouTube channel. Everything is Paris Off Script except LinkedIn, where I am Lane Rosenthal. On my website, you'll also see my upcoming trips. I have a trip this coming April, the 25th to the 29th, where there is still room for spontaneity, shall we say, if there's somebody in the audience who is blown away and wants to have open eyes in Paris and can be spontaneous. There are spots this April, the 25th to the 29th, and there are 2 trips in the fall, October 24th to 28th and November 6th to 10th. I choose these times because they are off script times, and they tend to be not so much April, but definitely now, and definitely November, less crowded times in Paris.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I certainly encourage those who are interested to get in touch with you. We'll also post this in the group. But I want to thank you so much for sharing with us, your story, and that you really are a living, walking example of someone who, I mean, when I met you on Zoom at the conference in October, your enthusiasm literally burst through the Zoom screen, or whatever the video conference was that we had.
Right.
And I just thought, wow, what a special person you are.
Thank
I'm
you.
so grateful to have you here. And like I said, I want to encourage, I want to go on one of your trips, and I want to encourage those in the group to follow up with you, not only for your beautiful energy, but also for what you do in terms of, really leading people through these wonderful, all-inclusive trips around the maybe not typical Paris, but the most enriching Paris.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. Stephanie, let me thank you as well. You've been incredibly generous. Thank you for all the nice things you've said. And my trips, yes, they are fun. They are interesting. Did I say they're fun? We do have a good time. Yes. It's not about me saying, open your eyes. My goal is to have people enjoy themselves, yes, and see this wonderful place that is my passion.
Yes. Yes. And then that way also to experience loving life.
Yes.
Right? To get away from what most people have is the stressors of the everyday life, and to really build that muscle of loving life. And with you as a guide, I can't imagine anything better. So thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon. Bye for now, Lane.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Steph.